How No Contact Feels, Part 3. So to the Greater Narcissist. What does the imposition of no contact feel like to him, and how does he respond to the threat of such an imposition? Let us begin with you telling the Greater that the formal relationship has ended, and you convey this message in person. To set the scene, imagine a somewhat timid and apprehensive person stepping into the lair of the dragon. The black-scaled dragon, sulphuric fumes rising from him as he watches the advancing person. His glittering dark eyes are keen slits of observation. He misses nothing. This dragon is vast, an embodiment of power and destruction, long claws resting on the symbols of his magnificence. The low light gleaming on those impenetrable scales, the fangs protruding from the cavernous mouth. This dragon is in its domain and knows it rules all that it surveys. As this nervous person approaches, message held in trembling hand. This dragon already knows what is written on that message. He is particularly perceptive and recognizes from the demeanor and body language of the approaching person that this is not someone bearing good news, but rather the opposite. Yet, such is his power, his magnificence, he remains unperturbed. He knows his might. Yes, he says in that charming purr of a voice, as he indicates for the messenger to make his delivery. The messenger swallows and unfurls the scroll and starts to read. The dragon listens, impassive. No hint of what is going on beneath the surface is evident to anybody observing, but so much is happening. This is the scene when you decide to deliver the news to the Greater Narcissist that the formal relationship is over. The Greater Narcissist will listen to you. Your nervousness, possible fearfulness, and borderline apologetic behavior is already fueling him. If somehow you are able to muster anger to propel the delivery of your message, your bristling indignation fuels him too. He has no need to erupt like the lesser. He will allow you to say your piece. Be in no doubt that the Greater will not welcome this news at all. Your words may be fueling him, tinged as they are with anger or fear, but your intended action is one huge criticism to him. You are daring to reject him. You have the audacity to tell him that it is over. This is igniting his fury, but you will not see it because the Greater is able to exert significant control over this fury, also aided by the fuel words that you are providing. And therefore, whilst the fury is churning away under the surface, the Greater is calculating and evaluating. He will listen to what is said and he will understand your concerns. Of course, he will not accept them. How dare someone as inferior as you seek to challenge and blame someone as mighty as him? But nevertheless, he is no fool, and as a consequence, he will listen to what is said, ready to pick your words apart. Remaining in control, you can therefore expect to receive a preventative hoover, which is unparalleled amongst our kind. We do not want to lose you as a primary source of fuel. This would amount to an even greater criticism than the threat of you doing so. This would wound us and weaken us through the cessation of our primary source of fuel. Accordingly, we will deploy a preventative hoover. This will manifest to you as a major charm offensive. You can expect to be told, "Nobody loves you the way that I do, and I could not bear to lose you. Why destroy all this for the sake of an argument or two?" I have given you so much, but this is just the start. There is a whole world for you and I to conquer together. People look at us, and they are envious of what we have. You do know that, don't you? Why sacrifice what we have? Ask yourself, is it really worth it? Don't listen to what they say. They do not know just how much my love burns for you now. After all this time, you are all that matters to me. Don't spoil things just as we were making a start. I adore you. I love you. You are the one for me. There are so many others who would give anything to be with me, but you know that, don't you? I do not want them. I want you. Let's not argue. Let's go to bed. Note that there is no contrition in these statements. The Greater is not going to accept any blame here, nor not even false contrition. Not yet. Observe also that any concerns you may have expressed about our behavior will have been relegated to a position of insignificance, brushed over and largely ignored. This is because in the mind of the Greater you are privileged to be with us, and your complaints really ought not to be made. Instead, the Greater will rely on using his charm and magnetism to underline his love for you. How wonderful things really are being in a relationship with him, and that in essence, you would be a fool to go anywhere else. Allied to this charm, the Greater will also unleash some additional future faking. The Greater loves bribery and the promise of magnificence. He has delivered already during the golden period, and we know that you want this again, so we dangle this promised land in front of you. You can expect to be told, look, let's book a holiday. You can choose. We can go away and you will see how right you were to stay with me. It's a pity that you feel this way because I was about to propose to you. I am disappointed, really, as I was looking at houses only yesterday for us to buy together. The future for us is bright. Do you realize that? Few couples are so fortunate to have what we have. You cannot do this. I said to myself only yesterday that I wanted to grow old with you. I hope you reconsider, as I wanted to take you on a shopping spree. After all, you deserve to be treated, don't you? Promises, future treasures and delights all dangled in front of you, and made to be so tempting. The preventative hoover that the Greater will use will feel almost like a monologue. You will not be allowed to depart. The Greater will position himself between you and the door. He will gently take you by the arm and lead you to sit down. He will lock the car doors if this conversation takes place in a vehicle, and he will take such steps to ensure you are not given the opportunity to walk away easily. He will not be aggressive in taking such steps. Instead, he will act with apparent warmth and gentleness, his mouth moving as he continues his charming speech so that you barely notice he is moving you away from the front door. The Greater will keep going and going and going. He has the cognitive function, the energy levels, and also he will be feeding off the fuel you'll be giving him. You cannot help but smile at the charming comments, the resurrection of memories you and he have together. Your eyes will betray you, and he will use that fuel to power his preventative hoover. Whereas the lesser uses violence to shock you into submission and prevent your departure, the Greater will grind you down. It is almost hypnotic how he will say the same thing but in 1,000 different ways, touching you here and there, smiling, charming, and eroding your will and resistance. He knows how good he is at this. He did it before, when he deployed the seduction hoover in the very beginning. He will remind you of all the good things, using those matters he has filed carefully away, extracting them now as he creates a showreel of all the best parts of the relationship. Each time you try to raise a complaint, he will shush you into submission, his calculating mind knowing which reassuring expression to wear. The Greater adopts the position that you are just a silly fool who does not know better, that you might have had your head turned by the seditious whispers of others, but this is not a concern for him. He will dismiss concerns, wave away worries, and downplay detractions. Everything is under control. He is the generous benefactor who knows the world far better than you, and you should just smile, do as you are told, and everything will be all right. The Greater has a slight concern about the threat to his primary source of fuel, but it is only slight. The reality is that he finds your threat more amusing to him because it allows him a further opportunity to engage in what he enjoys doing, controlling people. Like that mighty dragon who knows he could crush the messenger in an instant, or incinerate him with flaming breath in the blink of an eye. The Greater knows that he could lash out at the victim, but he's enjoying drawing the fuel from his drawn-out preventative hoover. It entertains him to see that Kitty has claws as you threaten to walk out and leave. We are not panicked. We remain in control, and we are toying with you, nudging and coaxing you into changing your mind and remaining. This is why the charm offensive is unleashed. The Greater has no need, yet, to lash out. Nor is he going to demean himself with pity plays. That is for weaker people than him. No, this threat will be extinguished by him engaging in charm, a peacock's performance. And once you have been worn down into submission and changed your mind, his supremacy is affirmed, his primary source is secured, and all is well as the golden period is reinstated. Understand, though, that as the Greater leads you by the hand up the staircase to allow you to experience that passion between the sheets once again, causing you to believe that make-up sex is wonderful, he will shoot a glance at the mirror, and those eyes will glint with malevolence. You have the golden period once again, but your treachery has been noted, and you will be punished for it once the devaluation starts again. You will be reminded of your foul, traitorous behavior and made to pay for it. We do not forget such things. What if this charm offensive for once fails us? This is the fourth time you have sought to escape, and armed with superior knowledge and having undertaken proper preparation, you are determined to see this through. How does the impending no contact feel when you turn and walk towards that door? The Greater will not apply a sob story. He will save those for the follow-up hoovers in due course, when he is truly feeling sorry for himself for the loss of fuel. Instead, once the Greater realizes that persuasion and charm has not worked, and you are intent on leaving, the effect of this criticism starts to take its toll on us. Our control is beginning to slip. Not completely. There is no sudden eruption of fury like the lesser, but instead, the mask of control slips, and you will be subjected to malice. It is rare, although not unheard of, for the Greater to use physical violence. If he does, it is more along the lines of pushing, pulling, a raised fist, but one that does not connect, spitting, or a sudden grasp of the throat. The intention is not to cause significant physical harm, because the Greater regards that as beneath him. He is also alive to the need to avoid harming his plausible deniability by leaving evidence of physical violence. Instead, he manifests it as a threat of what he is capable of what might happen if he is pushed. His threats will be made as you try to leave. You can expect to lose your job if you walk out on me. I will see to it. I will report you to your regulatory body if you leave. Those videos will be plastered all over the internet. Do you really want your parents to see those photographs and see their princess taking on 3 men at once? Be a shame if some drugs turned up in your car, wouldn't it? You can kiss goodbye to your practice license if you go through that door. The preventative hoover will shift from charm to malice in an instant, pushed by your move towards exiting and cutting off the primary source of fuel. If you respond to these threats with fear, anger, defiance, or upset, you will provide fuel, and this will encourage the Greater to continue. Whereas before he engaged in charm to wear you down, we will now engage in using malice to frighten you into submission, and we will keep going and going until you have either given in or walked out. If you give in, we will be delighted, and we will welcome you back to the fold with open arms, exhibiting the magnanimity that we believe we possess. You made a mistake, of course you did, but like a sinner who has come to repent, you are forgiven, although not really, and you are treated like a naughty child who has seen the error of her ways. The golden period is reinstated once again, but there will be a price to pay further down the line. Should you evade the charm offensive and also the malicious assault and still walk away from the greater, then one of two things will happen. Generally, with the lower Greater Narcissist, an initial grand hoover will shortly follow. The formal relationship has ended. The greater wants his primary source back, and therefore he will launch an initial grand hoover combining charm with contrition. The upper greater will be wounded by the cessation of fuel and mortally offended that someone could both decide to leave him and fail to succumb to his masterful powers. This will result in the greater erupting in a frenzy. He will deploy smear campaigns against the victim, rally his coterie and lieutenants to ensure that repeated malign follow-up hoovers are launched. This is done with the intention of making your life a complete and utter misery, so that you come crawling back asking for it to stop. If the initial grand hoover fails to charm, pity you into returning, or the malicious campaign fails to batter you into submission, then we will be placed into chaos mode as our fuel levels drop. Three things are placing us under considerable pressure at this point. 1. Our fuel levels are dropping because there is no longer a primary source. 2. We have used up energy through the initial grand hoover or malign hoovers. 3. The criticism from losing you and failing to restore you as a primary source has wounded us considerably. Unlike the lesser or mid-range narcissist, who would risk entering depression and stupor at this point, the greater still has sufficient resources to launch a survival bid. We will drain our supplementary sources of fuel, turning to friends, family, colleagues, and so forth, as we frantically find a new primary source. Once done, we will achieve stability. Given the higher cognitive function of the greater, the increased charm levels and calculating ability, we have the best chance at using these supplementary sources of fuel to power the seduction of a new primary source. Once that has been achieved, there is stability, and in due course consideration will turn, subject to the spheres of influence, to hoovering you again. What happens if you fail to stand before us to deliver the message of cessation? Indeed, given the lengths we will go to as you have listened to above, if you do decide to escape a greater, you ought not to deliver the news in person. If you send a message or allow us to work it out that you have escaped, then the immediate reaction of the greater will be to be wounded. The failure to realize you were on the cusp of leaving highlights a weakness in our perception. The fact that you have chosen to leave reinforces that you regard us as substandard, deficient in some way, and it is a huge criticism. The fury will ignite, but the greater will still remain in control, but not for long. His immediate response will be to launch an initial grand hoover to get you back using charm, and on this occasion there will be more pity involved because the wounding will be greater. If this initial grand hoover does not work, the wound increases, the fury becomes too great, and the greater will lose control, lash out with malign hoovers in order to draw fuel and stabilize, or to cause you to come crawling back. If no fuel is yielded or you do not return, then the greater will be pushed into chaos mode, as I described above, and will drain supplementary resources and secure a new primary source as quickly as possible. What, however, if you have read my works, and you have not only prepared for your departure, but you have executed it in such a way that the greater cannot even contact you? The initial grand hoover does not even get off the ground. The malign hoovers cannot be deployed because you cannot be contacted. In such an instance as this, the greater is in real danger because he has suffered repeated wounded criticisms. 1. He did not anticipate the danger, which offends his sense of omnipotence. 2. He has lost his primary source of fuel, and is not only weakened by that, but wounded by being so careless. 3. He could not contact the primary source, and thus has been outwitted. And 4. His usual responses have been rendered impotent. In such an instance, the greater will turn to supplementary sources immediately and look to secure a new primary source. It is usually the case, for the reasons described above, that the greater is able to secure a new primary source pretty quickly and therefore achieve stability. If, on the rare occasion, this does not happen, and there are no supplementary sources available to sustain him, the construct will crumble and the creature inside will be unleashed. The greater will sink into a severe depression, almost becoming catatonic, as his construct, which he wanted the world to see, has collapsed. The very thing which he does not want to be unleashed has escaped. I would reinforce that this is extremely rare because of the greater's ability to use supplementary sources and the speed by which he is able ordinarily to secure a primary source. Achieving the consignment to oblivion of the greater through no contact is very rare. Suffice to say that a successful departure and implementation of no contact will almost slay the dragon, and will result in the greater becoming preoccupied with healing the wounds you have caused and focusing on his new primary source, giving you a period of respite, until such time as the conditions become right for further follow-up hoovers. But that is a different story.